Good morning, Facebook friends. Helen Arcantu here, CEO of the YWCA of Northern New Jersey. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm so happy to welcome you again today to YWTV. Today is a tough topic. Here in New Jersey, we have had another tragic death related to bullying. And it was important to us and our team here that we make sure that we bring this conversation to you in light of that. It is so important to educate, build awareness, and, really help within our families around this issue, but also, band together to advocate for the support that's needed here in our state and across our country to protect our children, from what's happening with bullying. Bullying, as we know, is defined as unwanted aggressive behavior. It happens amongst school-age children daily. It involves real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is often repeated, and it has the potential to really be long-term, especially if there's no intervention put in place quickly. And so for that, it needs to be identified and it needs to be stopped. And that's why this conversation is so, so important. We know that bullying causes serious, lasting problems. It's not just that moment, that there's impact. And the physical, the psychological, the social, the educational harm. And of course, we know that it can also be fatal in terms of an outcome as well. We know that it can happen during any time in school hours, but we also know that it can happen outside of school hours as well. It could happen on the playground. It can happen on the school bus. And of course, we also know now that it happens very, very readily and heavily connected to our virtual worlds, whether it's through social media or different chatting apps. There's, unfortunately, as technology has increased, the avenues for bullying have increased significantly as well. When we internally talked about how to share this conversation with you, our team quickly thought of Diane Grossman to join us. She has a personal story, but she also has created quite an army, quite an army to help address and educate our communities around bullying. So I'm really so grateful that Diane was able to join us today. I'd like to welcome her to our show. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you.
And although I could tell you a lot about the background of Mallory's Army, which is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable foundation that is dedicated to behavioral change, that was formed in July of 2017. I think it would be better for Diane to tell you how the foundation came to be. And so with that, I'm going to kind of kick us off with the mantra of Mallory's Army's foundation, as well as, I know it's one of Diane's mantras as well, that sticks and stones must change, to illustrate to our community that hurtful words can be just as painful as throwing stones.
Yes.
So Diane, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And I said this to you as we kind of got ready to go live, and I just really want to say it again. It's so generous when parents, and for us, I see so many mothers that really take on the traumas and tragedies that have happened to their families and turn them into a learning and teachable moment, and a moment of action for our communities, so that there is not a repeat, and so that we can do better. And it what a beautiful and powerful tribute to your daughter, with what you've done with your organization. And I just really want to start by thanking you for that, and creating this space and the ability to be able to share the work that you've done with our community as you have.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I I'm humbled to be included in the platform. And it's a, grief is the definition of love, right? And so I would like to, before I start introducing myself and talk about Mallory's story, I want to add to a little bit of what the context that you brought up about HIB or bullying. And one of the things I think that is often missed, and I know I'm kind of skipping ahead, but I think it's important that we say this following, is bullying behavior. It's not about the behavior, it's how the behavior makes another person feel. And I think that that's often what gets lost when we're diagnosing bullying behavior, is that we focus on the behavior. We say things like kids will be kids, or we talk about, well, it really wasn't that bad, or my kid was just joking, or you misunderstood it. It doesn't, none of that matters. What matters is how the behavior made the victim feel. And I think that
Mhm.
that's getting skipped over in a lot of the conversation, whether it's an after school program, an in school program, cyberbullying, whatever the platform is, wherever the behavior takes place. What we're forgetting is we're trying to diagnose the behavior, and we're really not looking at what happens to the victim. And one of the things that's really important is in New Jersey, they've defined it that way. So the New Jersey HIB really does talk about it from the victim's perspective, yet even 15, 20 years later, and that's how old the New Jersey HIB is, which is a whole other conversation. Even
Mhm.
though this HIB law has been around for 15 plus years, we're still confused by its actions and what we should be doing with it. So it's not about the behavior. So for the parents who have children who are acting out, stop defending the behavior and understand that the law is written to support the victim. And we should be talking about how the behavior makes the victim feel. And while it is repeated behavior, bullying can come down to one action. It doesn't have to be repeated behavior. It typically is, but it very early on in what we call gateway behaviors, it's generally one
Mhm.
action that, and it can be defined as bullying. So just wanted to put in that little bit of a plug so that we understand the topic of the true conversation. My daughter, Mallory Grossman, was 12 years old, and she was a victim of relational and what we call gateway behavior bullying. Relational bullying is, I'm friends with you on Tuesday. I'm not friends with you on Wednesday. I'm going to talk about you on Friday. Can you sleep over Saturday? I'm going to take pictures of you, post it online, and make fun of you. So, relational bullying, also known as mean girls, is, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous behaviors. Not only is it confusing for the victim, but oftentimes the adults in the room are very confused. Mallory's behavior, what we call gateway behaviors, started very early on in fifth grade. And of course, the girls exaggerated and continued to elevate their hate as they got into sixth grade. Mallory dealt with the eye rolling, the pulling of the hair, the name calling. She dealt with every day those type behaviors. They would kick her chair, they would pull her hair. And I always say to teachers, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening, right? Like, we have to understand that just because we didn't catch it doesn't mean that it's not happening. That's why I go back to HIB with the victim is right in this scenario, right? So Mallory was a victim of that type of bullying. And then, of course, as the girls got away treating Mallory this way, and the reason why I say got away with it is because this Mallory's behavior, what she was experiencing, was reported in writing and verbally numerous times, regularly. So the school was very aware of what was going on, or they should have been very aware. And then, of course, once the girls were allowed to misbehave and continue to misbehave, they elevated their hate, which is oftentimes what happens is, oh, well, I got away with this, so let me do this. And so, unfortunately, they took it online, and they took Mallory's picture without permission, edited it through Snapchat, and posted it online without and without Mallory knowing about it. And then Mallory didn't have Snapchat because I didn't believe in it, and I still don't. And so, unfortunately, the girls would screenshot the images and send them to her, once again, continuing to let her know what's being said about her. And then ultimately Mallory ended up taking her life. The social component and the social media component is really important to address, because it's not about the people that are making fun of you. It's the people that are making fun of you and their 900 plus followers. It's this gang like behavior that takes place online. And even the kids who see the post, like the post, laugh at it, give it a smiley face, they're just as responsible for the bullying behavior, because they're endorsing it, right? They're empowering the people who made the post. And so for the parents who say, well, my kid didn't really bully them, they were just, they were just there. When the kids like it, share it, heart it, give it a smiley face, whatever it is, give it a laughing face, you're just as guilty, because you were participating in the bullying behavior. And it's that gang-like mentality online that is so dangerous, particularly to children in middle school, when they're doing everything that they possibly can to try to fit in.
We run the sexual violence resource program for the state of New Jersey for Bergen County. And, what you're talking about really is what in our world of that work is really bystander intervention, right? If you see
Right,
something that you can either actively support it or actively help stop it,
right,
by your behaviors. And so, what you're describing really is so important for parents who are listening to hear, because we need to educate our children that, you know, I know that there is a world of peer pressure, that our children are involved in. But if they are liking these types of posts and they are, kind of engaging, even if they feel like that's passive, it really isn't. It really is,
right.
feeding into the issue. So it's important for us to educate our children about that. I know there's so much for us to educate them about in relation to social media for sure, but that piece is important.
Well, I think that leans to the part of it is if we're having to educate them on a moral compass of behavior, then they're not mature enough to navigate it. And that's really
Correct.
the conversation we should be having. Is I don't think our children need any more further deeper education. I think that we as a society need to recognize that if we're having to explain to our children that by them endorsing this type of behavior, when they know organically it's a mean, nasty post, if we're having to say to them, oh, you shouldn't participate in that, then that is our answer, that they're not mature enough to navigate the content that they're exposed to. And so the real question there is why do we feel the need to introduce technology at such a young age to our children when they have access to content they're not mature enough to navigate? And this goes even deeper. This goes to porn, this goes to eating disorders, this goes to abuse, domestic violence. Like, we could have a much deeper conversation, but again, if we're having to educate our children, then maybe they're not mature enough to navigate online behavior.
That is such an important piece. I mean, everything you created, human trafficking. I mean, there's so many issues that are connected for sure. To really be considering, as 100%. So, obviously, there's a lot of parents. I feel like that, that could be watching that
Yeah,
have children either in one bucket or the other, right?
right.
So that they could be in the bucket that their child is being bullied, and they might need some support in thinking about how to navigate that for their
Right.
child. But then there's that whole other bucket, is their child could be the bully.
Well, and both could be true for both
Right.
children, right? Like,
Yeah.
first of all, we have to recognize that children are children. That's number one. If 1 in 4 children report being bullied, and I use the word report because I believe it's even deeper than that, but 1 in 4 children report being bullied at school and online, that means there's a lot of victims, and that means there's a lot of perpetrators. And I think what happens is parents are so worried about their children being labeled, right? We live in a world where labels are important. And so parents are worried about their children being labeled a bully, that they have a tendency to make excuses for the behavior. And then, of course, the children that are victims, the parents are trying to advocate. So what I would say to both parents is both scenarios are teachable moments, that
Mm.
we as parents, this is our job, to educate our children and teach them how to behave appropriately. But it starts with us, right? Our children learn a lot of their behaviors from us. They mimic us. So if we're going to tell our children not to be on their phones past 9 o'clock at night, then we don't need to be on ours, right? If we're going to tell our children to stop abusing technology, then our relationship with technology has to change. So that's kind of that soapbox. For parents who are victims, the unfortunate part of it is that it is still up to the school system to determine whether your child is bullied. So what would I say to parents who feel that their child is a victim? Self-education. You have to be in a perpetual state of self-education. It's not enough to think you know what harassment, intimidation, and bullying is. You need to know what it is defined by your state, right? So what is it defined by your state? New Jersey has 87 pages of an HIB document that is accessible to every single person to look and see what is bullying. The first 10 pages are the most important. It talks about what bullying is, how it's defined, how it makes the victim feels, and how to go about reporting it. So for every parent out there who has a child that they think is being bullied, you need to know the laws and you need to know how you report it, and what you do. To the parents who have a child that is being accused of being a bully, this is an opportunity for you to have a teachable moment. Every child is going to misbehave. Every child is going to make fun of someone. And just because your child did not intend to hurt someone doesn't mean that they didn't. It doesn't matter what their intentions are. I stepped on your toe. You just had bunion surgery. I didn't know it. I didn't mean it. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean for the next 2 hours that your toe is going to throb and hurt because I stepped on it. Do you see my point? So it's not about that your kid's intention or didn't intend or what have you. It's a teachable moment for you as a parent to allow the system to punish your child appropriately for the behavior, because I certainly would much rather parent a child at 13 who has done something that they shouldn't have done rather than wait until they're 19 and in college and never been reprimanded. And by the way, the definition of bullying and hazing is exactly the same, but at 19, it's a felony. So I would much rather parent my 13-year-old than bail my 19-year-old out of a hazing incident. That's why it's important. Let your child learn teachable moments at an early age so that way they grow up, navigate what's going on when they are independent and they have to make harder choices about following the crowd or making the decision to be an upstander.
Yeah, I mean, obviously what you're saying just makes so much sense, and it really is a mindset shift from a lot of how we as, in our state, in our community think about these issues, right?
Right.
There's a lot of us and them. We put everyone in different categories. Parents are working against each other as not collectively giving a same strong message here. So I really appreciate either your reframing all of this for us to kind of look at it in a less defensive way, and
Right.
really looking at it in a proactive way of, let's just deal with the fact that this exists, and let's, move
Parent it.
us all forward and
Right. I
parent
think for
it.
some
Yeah.
reason, we as parents take it. I'll tell you, my grandmother used to say it's not a sin to live in a dirty house. It's a sin not to keep, to not clean it. And so it's one of those things, like, it's not a sin for your child to act out and misbehave. That is a normal behavior. And we have all been jerks to someone at some point in our life. But I think that parents have somehow decided that if their child is, and which is why I respectfully disagree with the current New Jersey HIB, is that we treat it like a label, like, oh, I don't want my kid to have a hib against them. Like, first of all, there's no such thing as a permanent folder. You heard it here. There is no such thing as a permanent folder, right? Your child in 6th grade is not going to be excluded from Princeton because they got a hib for them because they made fun of a girl. That's not going to happen. So stop treating it as if it's somehow a reflection of your parenting. You know what is a reflection of your parenting? Not dealing with the behavior. That's a reflection of your parenting. But your child being called out for misbehaving or teasing someone or making fun of them or writing a bad post, that doesn't make you a bad parent. Not parenting that behavior does. And so I think that one of the biggest problems New Jersey has is that we did a great job of defining it, but we did very little to redirect, discipline, or make the behavior accountable. And so we've dumped this on the schools to kind of figure it out. And so schools don't have to deal with the angry parent, they have a tendency to not define the behavior as bullying and call it code of conduct rather than dealing with behavior, because they're trying to satisfy both sides of the fence. And in this situation, we have to be willing to piss off 10% of the population so that 100% of us can be happy. And until we're willing to do that as a society, I think that bullying is going to be a continued problem, and it will escalate. And then in that vein, you're going to see eating disorders, you're going to see self-harm, domestic violence, you're going to see abuse, you're going to see situations of rape. Like, bullying is not just an isolated problem. It is a cultural, moral problem that we have not only here in the United States, but I'm going to be appearing on Korean television tomorrow that Korea has a major bullying problem. This is a world problem that we have to deal with. And until we decide that making fun of someone is not okay, and there's teeth in laws that hold parents and their children accountable, until that happens, we really aren't going to fix this problem.
Well, YWTV, we created this medium to, really get information out to our community, and we always put a call of action into all of these conversations that we do. So thank you for so clearly giving us one there right now, for those listening. And obviously, so, there have been many already. Um, I, want to make sure that we are letting folks know about your organization and what
Yeah.
kind of supports that you provide, because parents and caregivers definitely need to keep learning and also know where to go to get help once they're in these situations, whether it's how to navigate interactions with the school district in terms of managing something, whether it's about putting resources in place for their child to deal with the aftermath of what's going on, whether it's to how to parent and talk to their child about something that they're seeing them doing that they'd like them to stop doing. Give us some places that we can go to get more information and direction
Okay.
on these items.
So, Mallory's Army, we're more of a platform of resources, and we do our best. I saw that you put up stopbullying.gov,
Yes.
and that's the number one place I send everybody to, is because they have a map that goes up and they can show you all of the anti-bullying laws in your community, in your state. So, and they give some great resources on that from a government perspective. Every situation with parents are different, and we do our best, but we're not a call center. So, one of the things that parents have a problem doing is that they reach out at the 11th hour when their child has already attempted self-harm, or those situations, we have to refer them to their pediatrician, because that's out of the scope of what we can do. Mallory's Army, our film, is a great resource. That's $5, right? $5. Watch the film. There's a lot of information in that. And the most important information is, after you watch the film with your kids, sit down and have a conversation. Talk to them, whether they're a victim or whether they're potentially a perpetrator. And I hate that word, but talk to your kids. Right? Like, talk to them, have a conversation. Have you thought about self-harm? Do you know who the bully in your schools is? Do you know who the victims are? Like, sit down and have a conversation with your kids. Most parents are so afraid to talk to their kids about self-harm because they're afraid that they're going to kind of introduce their children to suicide. I'm going to tell you something. I call it the 3 S's. They learn about Santa Claus, they learn about sex, and they learn about suicide, and they all learn it on the playground at school. So who's leading the conversation? If the 5th graders are leading the conversation about suicide, then we've got to, but if the adults in the room are leading the conversation. So that's why Mallory's Army and our film is so important. It's an incredible resource for parents to really reach out, watch a film, and learn about the circumstances that we experienced, and to have those hard conversations. So that's number one. We have had in the past parent events. We've had school assemblies and all of those things. Unfortunately, parents don't show up, right? They just don't. And I get it. We're working. We've got soccer practice. We've got softball practice. We've got dance class. We've got all that. What would I say? Show up. Show up. Parents need to be in a perpetual state of self-education. Programs like yours, programs at the library. You need to know what resources are in your community. Who are the mental health resources? I remember as a teenager, when I used to babysit, they would leave behind poison control phone number. They would leave behind the fire department. They would leave the police department. Like there was literally a whiteboard that had all the information, all emergency numbers. We have somehow abandoned that philosophy, and we need to get back to that. You need to know the resources in your community before you need them. You need to know where's the mental health services. Have a conversation with your pediatrician. Make sure that your pediatrician is having conversations with your child about self-harm, about eating disorders, right? Like we need to make sure that we're having conversations with people that are already in our social network so that when we are faced with a crisis, we have a support system already in place. And that's really what Mallory's Army is about. It's about teaching you to create your circle of trust, your circle of community, and also being really well aware of what's going on in your child's life, in your child's phone, in your child's devices, what's going on in their school system. Participate in Board of Ed meetings. Show up. If you want to know the culture in your school, then maybe participate in your Board of Ed meetings. Be there. When they have PTA meetings, be there. Yeah. Nothing is more important than a PTA meeting. Nothing is more important than a Board of Ed meeting. Because once you learn the characteristics of those people, then you know the resources that you have access to in your world.
Yes, yes. And, for our viewers, everything that Diane has mentioned, we have the links for you so you can easily access them right here in the comments. You can go to stopbullying.gov. You can go to mallory'sarmy.org, the YouTube watch here so that you can access the video that she referenced. And, again, there are definitely resources, school districts. I know my school district recently had a Zoom that they invited parents to come to. But, Diane, what you're saying is so true. We're all so busy. And so we feel like, oh, well, I don't have to go to this one thing because I know about it, or, I'll catch the next one. But we really need to make this a priority. Our children are suffering.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter on what end of the spectrum they're on. They are suffering and they need the guidance and support. And you've really given us so much to think about. And I hope for us too that we're reprioritizing, our actions, our investments of our time, and even where you started at the beginning in terms of modeling our engagement with technology to really send the right message to our children, as opposed to just telling them not to be on these platforms and not to be on all the time is an important call out. And so I do appreciate you doing that. So what is next that we should be thinking about? What are you working on with Mallory's Army? How can we support? I mean, obviously there's a lot of personal action items here for us as parents to be listening to. But from an advocacy perspective, I mean, we are actively engaged with, connecting to our folks in Trenton, connecting to our, local councils, connecting to our folks in DC. What else can we do to help be part of moving this trajectory in the right direction here?
I think, and I appreciate that. And I definitely think that. I think that we do need to have conversations with the people in Trenton. There's a lot of conversation and it did not pass. And I am not a supporter of. There's potential legislation that's in play to do mental health screenings at schools. And I certainly understand how that could be helpful, but I also understand the dangers. And as a parent who has lost a child to suicide, the mental health component of this conversation needs to stay in the lane of healthcare. It is not a problem for school systems to adopt. You need to fix the bullying behavior that takes place in your school before you tackle mental health screenings. And I'm outwardly speaking against this because there's going to be a lot of conversations about it. And I know that people are going to say, well, Diane, if we can screen for it, then that means that we can look for it, right? That we can be more aware of it. I can tell you right now, my daughter would not have been on the radar for mental health screening. What is happening with our children when it pertains to bullying and suicide, it is it is, what's the word? Impulsive. Our
Mm.
children are impulsive, right? It's no different than when I was a kid, and unfortunately, there was a kid that were playing with guns and they played Russian roulette, and one of the kids died from it. It's impulsive, childlike behavior. We don't need to treat suicide as it pertains to children in the same vein that we do a 50-year-old man that dies by suicide. And I kind of see those two worlds starting to blend a little bit because we're using mental health like this broad umbrella. And we need to treat the cancer that we have with an oncologist and not with a social worker. It doesn't mean that I don't think that we shouldn't blend and we shouldn't have certain resources in our school systems, but we need to deal with the bullying behavior that causes the issues. And I see the school systems and people in Trenton wanting to create more projects for school systems so that there can be, and I think that the Chatham School District is a prime example of that. They are suing social media for mental health resources, but you still allow cell phones at school. You still use apps to communicate with your kids. So you don't get to have it both ways. So I think as the next steps for us is that we need to be paying strong attention to legislation, the messages that our Board of Eds are sending to Trenton through the representation of the Superintendent's Association. I think we should be paying attention to the Teachers Association. And as parents, I think that we need to start using our voice as a megaphone so that they understand that they're two separate crises, both need attention, but they need to stay in their lane.
Yeah, there's so much to this conversation that we need to educate ourselves on. I appreciate you giving us a lot to think about today. And again,
you're welcome.
for everybody watching, please, this just touches on it. We have not covered the topic for sure, but I hope what we have done is kind of put a spotlight that this is something that you need to move up on your to-do list and really put some time, attention, and effort to trying to better understand how you can support your child, better understand how you can protect, our community around us, better understand how we can get engaged in the larger advocacy effort. There's a lot to do here, and it's connected to so many other issues that you can feel like it's time efficient to invest your time in this one in particular, because it will help with so many others, as Diane has so clearly laid out for us to understand. So Diane, thank you again so much for creating this space again through your own personal experience and helping educate us so that, in hopes really that no other families have to deal with the trauma that you have all had to go through. And again, we're seeing unfortunately new cases, of tragic outcomes, and we really do not want to see anymore. And it's really important that we all, activate here to be able to make a change, and that being a constant and a regular occurrence here in New Jersey and across the country.
Right. Well, thank you so much for hosting us and having us and sharing our story. And we'll keep the conversation going, right? I'm sure
we will.
Something tells me that Diane and Helen are going to have another Facebook Live. And
I was just going to say, I don't think we're done for sure.
No,
and I do
certainly not.
encourage everybody to be, again, following Diane on her social media platforms to stay connected to the work that she's doing and ways that you can support it as well. We are all nonprofit organizations. I always say, it doesn't, from my perspective, there's a lot of great places to invest your time, your volunteering, your money, your support, your resources, pick one, because, whatever it is, I know that we're all making an impact with the work that we're doing. So
grassroots are so important to the community, and supporting organizations like ours, supporting organizations like yours that really do give us, and we do our best to be the army that we said we were going to be. So thank you so much again for hosting us and sharing our story. And you can always reach me at mallorysarmy.org.
Yes, and we'll all be following. And thank you again. And to our viewers, we appreciate that you took some time today. I also do encourage you, after listening, that you share this broadcast with someone else in your life. Keep the conversation going. Drop something that you learned into a conversation with another parent, with your partner, somewhere in the community to make sure that folks know more about the story. You can very easily share this by dropping the link into a text, sharing it through Facebook, on your page, putting it on Messenger. We definitely want to make sure that this conversation, gets out to as many people as possible, because it really can save a life, and if not many, and that's so important. And with that, we also look forward to spending more time with you this week on YWTV, so stay tuned with us. And we also do encourage you to stay connected to our social media. We have our Women's Leadership Conference next Wednesday, a week from today, at American Dream Mall, with Senator Ruiz as our keynote speaker, and a dream team of panelists throughout the day about helping you empower your voice and embrace change to succeed in your best life, whatever that is for you. And so we do hope that you consider joining us. We'll have the link here for you to register. We also have our Racial Justice Awards coming up on April 19th at the Montclair Art Museum. We're honoring some amazing activists and organizations in our community that are living our mission of eliminating racism. And so we do hope that you join us to support that event, and everything else we do, from summer camps to senior wellness classes to our girls activities, and also our menstrual equity program, taking contributions of products for us to give out into the community for that. So please stay connected to us on social media, and find your thing and get engaged with it. Everyone have a great day. And again, Diane, thank you so much for that time. Yes, yes, yes.
Bye.